Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this Go Big Basketball preview show. I know, youngster, this is not like before the season preview, so it's like, ooh, watch out for this game. We're actually going into the season a little bit after it started, but to be honest, I was telling you before we even started the show, to me, a lot of these teams are playing cupcake games. Some of the teams have played good, relevant games. They played a couple games in conference. But to me, college basketball doesn't start until you're in full swing conference game mode. And to me, that's after the holiday break. Yep. After the holiday break, it's all conference. You'll get a non-conference that is sprinkled in here and there when you have a bye in the conference for the week. But for the most part, once the holiday is over, it is all Big Ten basketball and ACC basketball, SEC basketball, Pac-10 basketball, whatever you want. It's mostly conference games. There'll be, like I said, there'll be a couple big-time non-conference games that go on, but for the most part, when the year turns, it is all conference basketball. So today, we're going to kind of breeze through the Big Ten. Some teams off to a pretty good roaring start. Couple of maybe surprises. But honestly, youngster, to me, I don't think there's a lot of surprises in the first 10 games of a season, even if you've played a big name team, because the good old cupcakes roll on down the schedule, even for my favorite Wisconsin Badgers. You know, we'll take a look at some of their wins. They're 2-0 in the conference, but every team you look at, you're going to go down that list and say, wonder how much batter you put in the pan for that cupcake. And so to me, it's a warm-up for your conference play. Unfortunately, like football, the games count. So they count on your record. They count to making it into the big dance in March. But we found out last year, Kevin, with Nebraska, just a certain amount of games doesn't mean you're going to get into the tournament. So I'm going to turn it back over to you. We're going to get right to it. We're going to talk Big Ten basketball all day today. That's it, just basketball.
Yeah, finally. This is our third year doing this, which is insane. I remember you calling me and me answering the phone and talking to you about doing a pure basketball show when I was in Orlando. And since then, I've moved twice. So not sure where I'll be next year, but for our fourth year, who knows? Who knows what'll be going on? In any case, to start off this, quote-unquote preview, again, all these teams basically except for, like one or two have played 10 games to this point. So, again, like Troy said, Big Ten basketball in its finest and talking about the conference schedule and all that stuff, it hasn't really started yet. It has. Every team's played 2 games, but basically the rest of the Big Ten conference schedule starts up in January. I believe January 2nd is the earliest date that I have seen. I've researched and done my homework on most of these teams, except for a couple. But I've gotten to a good deep look into most of them, and I think that January 2nd is when Big Ten play really starts to ramp up. That's the earliest I believe I've seen to this point through any of their schedules that I've looked ahead at. But I wanted to give people a little bit of a background before getting into this year. Going to breeze through this here, but 2017, 2018, Big Ten had 4 teams make the NCAA tournament. Kind of ridiculous. But teams like Penn State and Nebraska made the NIT. Like you said before, Nebraska piled up all these wins, but at the end of the day, the committee looked and said, you didn't really beat anyone. They had one quality win. And in terms of quality win, I mean teams that were like in the tournament. They might have had 2 from one in the non-conference, but they only had like one really good Big Ten win throughout the entire season. So there is no magical, hey, win 10 games in the Big Ten. I think they went, God, what was it, like 12-4 or something ridiculous, and they still didn't make the NCAA tournament. So there is no magical number, but I'll say this, that you've got to win at least 20 overall. That includes the cupcakes. So you can say they're not important. You can say they're just as important, whatever your stance is. You got to win 20 games. That's basically where the cutoff line is. And then, you start really looking at, the 80 or so teams that won 20 games, and it's like, okay, now, you can dive in if you're the selection committee and say, hey, Nebraska didn't really play anyone. And the teams they did in the Big Ten, it just so happened that they lost basically all those games. So that's what happened in Nebraska a year ago. But the 4 teams that made it in, you had Michigan, obviously. They were a 3 seed, and they lost to Villanova in the title game. And then you had a 2 seed in Purdue. They were 30-7 last year. They lost to Texas Tech in the Sweet 16. That's a good Texas Tech team. They had some NBA players on there. So nothing to cry about. I guess if you're a Purdue fan, obviously you wish they would have went further, but is what it is. Michigan State also a 3 seed, 30-5. They were supposed to be that juggernaut last year. We were talking about before the season started last year that this is the best team in the Big Ten, and yet they made it to the second round and lost. So that's the other thing with basketball is Michigan State can be better than even Michigan, and Michigan can make it to the title game, and Michigan State can make it to the second round. It only takes one bad shooting night or one really good shooting night from your opponent, and you're done. So as much as we want to stress...
ask Virginia about that one, youngster.
Yeah,
call up Tony
Virginia
Bennett and ask Virginia about a hot shooting night, and your team is cold.
Right. Yeah, they got the best of both storms, or the best and worst of the storm. They didn't shoot well, and they put up however many points they did, somewhere in the 50s, I think, which isn't insane for Virginia. They just usually win those games, 56-51. Instead, the other team, UMBC, shot the lights out and made whatever it was, 6 or 7 more 3-pointers, and they won by like 15. That can happen to anybody in the tournament, as we saw a year ago. It's less likely when you're a team like Michigan State who wants to run up and down the court, or you're Indiana and you want to run up and down the court and you're averaging 80 points a game, then it's less likely. But if you slow the game down and you methodically win 62-54 every game, that's fine. That's cool. That can win you a title, but it also leaves you more open to the possibility of just one team getting hot, scoring 70 points, and you losing. So nothing to say against that method of basketball. And to start this year's preview here, we're basically talking about one of those teams in Michigan. And right now, Michigan is the number 5 team in the country. They're 10-0. They look defensively, they don't look. I mean, 2 years ago, I remember saying this team's defense is actually like pretty good. It's underrated. Then last year, it's like, yeah, everyone knows this defense is really good. A year ago, and then they've got NBA players like Mo Wagner and guys like that could shoot as well. Those guys have left to the NBA, but they still have some more. Obviously, being the number 5 team in the country, they've got good players as well returning. But defensively, they're giving up 58 points per game. And in today's world of college basketball, that's very hard to do, especially when you're not deliberately slowing the game down like a Virginia does. And Virginia tries to slow the game down. Michigan doesn't try to slow the game down. They just have a top 5 defense at the worst. So they've been great. They've beaten Villanova 73-46 earlier this year. They beat North Carolina 84-67. They beat Purdue 76-57. So they're blowing out some good teams already on their defense. You keep Villanova to 46 points, that's unbelievable. Villanova's not going to push for a Final Four this year, but they're still Villanova. They're still good. You still have to respect them. And to hold them to 46, to hold North Carolina to 67, to hold Purdue to 57, it's impressive. So Michigan, absolutely all about the defense this year. A couple quick notes on the players. They only go 7 deep, it looks like, in terms of minutes played. You're only getting really 7 guys getting good game time per game. And leading the way is freshman.
Well, if you're on Michigan, Kevin, I'm going to bring this up, which is, to me is very odd that they're only playing 7 players in the cupcake portion. But now here's the thing. If you look at that schedule, it's not really cupcake. You mentioned some of the teams that they've played. I mean, the ACC Big Ten Challenge is not a cupcake. even when you're like on the bottom of that conference playing the bottom of the ACC, that's not really a cupcake game to me. But however you want to put it, preseason, cupcake part of the schedule, before your conference schedule, this is usually when coaches will tinker a little bit. And it'll be like last year, we talked about Izzo in Michigan State. Oh, he's trying to find the right combination, blah, 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 trying to see who's going to come off the bench. They were playing like 11 guys. And we're like, when conference starts, it'll be down to 7 or 8. Michigan looks like they're on a tear. Like, look, we know what we're going to do. We're ready to rock and roll. We're going to play every game, and this is our team. You know, you little freshman over here, you redshirt sophomore, guess what? Don't even tie your sneakers. You're not going in the game. We're only playing 7 or 8 guys. And that, to me, Kevin, that's unheard of before the true conference schedule starts. I thought that was pretty unique, that they're not playing the full roster, because you'll find that when you're getting ready for the conference, I mean, everybody knows there's an automatic bid if you win the conference. And when you're a team like Michigan playing it, so a lot of teams are preparing for it. But to me, Michigan, I don't want to say they're in mid-season form, but the way that they're playing right now, they're playing to win every game. There's no tinkering going on in Michigan right now.
Yeah, I want to add to that too. 7 guys are averaging at least 16 minutes a game. Next highest is under 5. So they're getting guys with 4 minutes a game, 3 minutes a game, 2 minutes a game, but basically they're playing 7 guys. You know. So
yeah, they're playing when they're up by 20.
Right.
They're letting the starters go and build a lead, and then they'll be like, okay, yeah, well, you know what? Hey, Joe Harry, go in the game now. Find your sneaker that you threw under the bench, because now you're going to play when we're up by 20.
Right.
That's what it is. It's mop-up duty.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I think that, I was saying, freshman Ignas Brazdeikis is their leading scorer right now, 17 points a game, 5 rebounds a game. I believe he's from Canada, They always find, whether it's Mo Wagner for a couple years over in Germany, they find these guys that can produce. And that's a hats off to John Beilein, another hats off reference. Hats off to John Beilein and finding these guys and recruiting these guys. And it's like, was Ignas Brazdeikis? I didn't even look. But was he a major recruit? Maybe he was. Maybe he was. But to come in and average 17 points a game as a freshman, and only doing it in 28 minutes too. I mean, he's not averaging 36 minutes a game and hoisting up shots and shooting poorly. He's shooting over 51% from the field and 38% from 3. So he's efficient as well. That's been the biggest thing for Michigan to this point. I think you didn't know how good this guy was going to be, and he's been fantastic, and he's been efficient, and he's been able to get you to average 74 points a game as a team, which it's not in the 80s like we're kind of used to with Michigan, but they understand how to win, and that's because of their defense. So you also got guys like Jordan Poole, Charles Matthews, John Teskey's a 7-1 guy. Those guys, averaging 13, 8 points a game respectively. You've got other guys outside of the freshmen that know how to play. They've been there. They've been in the system. They know how to play defense, obviously. And it helps to have a 7-1 productive big that can score, that can rebound, that can play defense. So Michigan's got it all, really. I wouldn't say they're a juggernaut, because I don't think they're a juggernaut offensively. And I think that offense wins in today's world of basketball just because of how the game is called and how efficient players are from 3. Usually you're realistically winning the title game, somewhere in the 80s. And if it's, we saw it last year. Michigan had a great defense. They played Villanova. It didn't matter because Villanova just was that efficient from the outside. And you couldn't hold Villanova's offense. You couldn't. You could slow them down. You could slow them down and put them in the 70s, but you've got to score right there with them. It's very hard to do when you go against a ridiculous offense like that. And, of course, every single year there are ridiculous offenses like that. But so that's Michigan. To me, I mean, this is absolutely a title contender. They made it to the title game a year ago. I think they're probably just as good, if not, well, they are better defensively, but they're as good this year. And ultimately, I think they could win the title. Would I pick them to? No, but I think they're a contender.
Would you say no because all the fans last year said fire him because he can't win the championship? Remember when all that crazy talk came out?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm being sarcastic.
Hey.
I thought he did. I thought last year could have been one of his finest coaching jobs ever. Getting Michigan to the title game? I mean, come on. Nobody expected Michigan to be the team. Everybody was on Michigan State bandwagon. So I like Michigan this year, Kevin. I think they're better defensively, like you said, and I think offensively, it's funny. We've been doing basketball now. It's going into our third year. And when you go down that roster, who's the guy? Who's the stud? It's good team basketball. And we've noticed this over the course of 2 years, going into the third, that when you lose the stud player, and we're going to talk about Purdue a little bit later, sometimes your team gets a little more efficient. Sometimes they play a little better team basketball. Just saying. And I look at Michigan, and they've bought into the system, and they've got guys that can score. And they've got a number of guys that can score. So you're going to have your go-to guy, like always. But there's not a guy in that roster where if you're an opposing team, like, well, we've got to focus and we've got to shut one guy down. They've got a number of guys that can contribute offensively, and they've got, well, I guess it's 7 guys, if you want to say it that way, that play good, hard-nosed defense. And you know me, Kevin, I'm an old-school guy. I like hustle plays. I like rebounding. I liked all of that effort. That's why I like Michigan. Now, like you said, do I think they can run through and win the title? Well, you never know. It's college basketball. But I wouldn't be like, oh, yeah, hands down, I'm going to pick Michigan to win. But I think they're definitely going to contend in the Big Ten and could very well be the Big Ten champion. But on a national scale, I need to see a little bit more. That's why when we do these preview shows, it's like, wow, last year we did it before the season even started. Now we're doing it 10 games in. I still haven't seen enough. I'll revisit that issue at the middle of February and see who's playing really good basketball at that time. But Michigan's a good team right now.
Yeah, I'll say this from what I've seen. I would pick Duke to beat Michigan. I would pick Gonzaga to beat Michigan. That's about it. Kansas is certainly up there as well. Right now, Kansas is the number 1 team in the country. But Duke and Gonzaga, to me, look, when they played each other in the Maui Invitational, that was an unbelievable game. I'm a Duke fan. Duke lost that game. That was an unbelievable game. Those two teams are fantastic on both sides of the ball. But anyway, moving on. So again, Michigan, could they win the title? Sure. They're a title contender, without a doubt. Moving on, number 9 right now, Michigan State. They're only 8-2, but they lost to Kansas by 5 points. Like I just said, Kansas is the number 1 team in the country right now. That, I believe, was their first game of the year as well. And they've also lost to Louisville in overtime. They're averaging 84 points per game. Michigan State wants to run up and down the court. They're not ridiculous with it, but they want to be up-tempo. Again, they're not, one of those teams averaging 90 because that's just the way they play, and they'll give up, 90 with it. That's not Michigan State, but they're about as up-tempo as you can get in the Big Ten on a consistent basis, realistically. So far, going 8 deep, and you've got some old names, basically, now juniors, Joshua Langford, Cassius Winston, Nick Ward. Those guys, Langford averaging 16 a game, Winston averaging 16 a game, Nick Ward averaging 15 a game. And then inside, Kenny Goins averaging 6 a game, but he's averaging 10 boards. This team's got bigs in Ward and Goins. This team's got guards in Winston and Langford. This, again, is a really good team. And I said it a couple years ago when Langford was a freshman that this guy could become really good. And you saw flashes of it as a freshman, and last year you saw flashes of it as well, but he didn't really take over because Michigan State had, what was his name? Jaren Jackson Jr. on the inside. He was really I believe he was a top 5 pick, if not top 10 pick, and then you also had Bridges as well. So that team last year was just loaded. That's why everyone liked them so much. But so you didn't get to see Langford really lead Michigan State, and this year you are. He is the true scorer, the go-to guy on this team. Winston can score as well, but Langford's a better shooter. No doubt about that. But so instead of having some absolute stud freshman at Michigan State, you don't have that. You've got juniors in Langford and Winston and Ward. You've got McQuaid as well, Xavier Tillman, people have heard of, Kyle Aaron.
That's because Mr. Izzo, youngster, went out and pounded down the recruiting path the last 2 years, brought in all these great freshmen, so-called, maybe we'll be one or done or two are done, and now these guys are all maturing. This is a scary team. And again, you lost Bridges. So where was the focus last year? On Bridges, like you said, on Jackson too. And now you've got guys that are going to try to find their own way. And the thing is, are they playing good team basketball? Yep. And I'm going to tell you what, I'll give my 2 cents, and then you can just wrap up Michigan State. You mentioned the up-tempo, the 80 points plus game, totally different from a Tom Izzo coach team. I mean, he's pushed before. But this is why Tom Izzo is one of the greatest basketball coaches of all time. He's not trying to slam a system down his players' throats. He's taking the talent that his players have, and he's adjusting his system to make it work with his talent. There's a lot of coaches out there, Kevin, a.k.a. Tony Bennett, in Virginia. You're going to play in this system, and this is the way we're going to play basketball. And if you don't like it, go somewhere else. Tom Izzo goes out and recruits, and yes, he's got a philosophy. He's got a system he'd like to play. But the thing about Tom Izzo is that when he's got talent, he's going to adjust what he does to get the most out of his players. And that's what you're seeing this year. And I think this team, Kevin, I mean, it's early in the season. They're 8-2. They're still in the top 10. Last year, everybody was waiting for Michigan State to find it and start just romping on people. This team's already found it. This team has their identity. This team is ready to rock and roll. And this is 2 teams in a row, Kevin, I've talked about in the Big Ten. Michigan State, Michigan. They're ready to rock and roll. And I know we've got a lot more teams to get through. But what I like about Tom Izzo is that all the years that he's coached, he is not stubborn enough to force a system down his players' throats. He adjusts to what he has recruited, and he makes it work. And this Michigan State team, I've caught a glimpse of them a couple of times. They're fun to watch. They're fun to watch, and they're really good. They're really good. So that's all I got.
Yeah, really good offensively, really good defensively, good guards, good bigs. As a team, again, 84 points a game leads the Big Ten right now. That probably won't stop going forward. This is probably the best offensive team in the Big Ten, top to bottom. And shooting 49% from the field as a team, 39% from three as a team, that's impressive. Michigan State's really good. Again, this is a title contender. If they popped up in the title game, it wouldn't be a shock. Should they? Maybe not, but they're really good. I think they're better than what number 9 next to their name right now indicates. And that sounds like the case for you as well, Troy. But moving on, Ohio State is 8-1 right now. They're the number 15 team in the country. And a year ago, we remember that it's like this team had juniors, seniors, and first-year head coach Chris Holtmann from Butler. And my thought going into the year last year was, are they going to buy into this dude as a first-year coach, or are they just going to kind of give up like they did a year ago? And they were fine a year ago. They improved a year ago. They did better than I thought a year ago. That was impressive. Now it's Holtmann's second year. He's already got them in the top 15, and they're 8-1. So they're doing stuff well. As far as wins, I mean, I can double-check their schedule here. The only loss they have right now is to Syracuse by 10, and Syracuse beat Michigan State a year ago. So Syracuse can beat anybody because of that zone they have. As far as wins, they won at Cincinnati. That's really about it. They won at Creighton. That's not a terrible win either. So Creighton's not as good as they have been in past years, but Creighton's decent, at least. So anyway, Ohio State has to be tested still, but this is a much better team than it has been the last couple of years. I think Chris Holtman's doing a really good job at Ohio State pretty quickly. So sophomore Caleb Wesson, that was his first big recruit, and now he's a sophomore. And 14 points a game, 6 rebounds a game, that leads the team. Both of them lead the team. So you're seeing his guys already in the second year. Yep, that's my leader. This is our guy. So he can hit the recruiting trail, as he showed at Butler. Butler was starting to get better recruits under Holtman, and it's like, if he can do that at Butler, then he can probably do it at Ohio State, and he's proven that so far. They've got a senior guard, C.J. Jackson, averaging 12 a game as well. They go at least 8 deep. They'll play 9 or 10 once in a while, but in general, this team is improved from what it has been the last couple of years, and we'll know more about them when they play better competition. Ultimately, they don't, like I said, they don't have a bunch of big wins, but we'll see in Big Ten play. I don't know if they're the number 15 team in the country, but this is probably a top 25 team. And should they make it to the Sweet 16, we'll see. But they should make it to the second round of the tournament, and that's certainly an improvement from the dumpster fire it was 2 years ago.
No, it was terrible 2 years ago.
Yeah.
They were just downright bad. Now, you had brought up the question, do you think I don't think they're the 15th best team in the country.
Right.
You went down their schedule, not dominating performances by any means, no big, huge wins, not playing in and out against the big boys, but they're better. I mean, if I'm going to talk about cupcake schedules, I'll use this analogy. When you're baking the cupcakes, you can't just let them there. You got to watch. You got to watch them. You got to watch them bake, right? Otherwise, you're going to burn them. And so when you're playing Ohio State, you better not take them lightly, because they'll go out and they're going to play hard. Like you said, they bought into the system. New coach, doing a great job. When the guys believe in the coach, they're going to play well. And when you start putting talent into a system and everybody's buying in, you got to watch out. You can't take Ohio State lightly. But again, do I think they're the top the 15th best team? No. Do I think they're even a top 25 team right now? Probably not. But this is a team that you cannot take lightly that's on your schedule. You've got to go and you've got to be ready to play, as with most teams in the Big Ten. And as we go through this, you're going to find out why. But I like Ohio State, Kevin. I think they're a middle of the pack team. Could they pull off some wins? I haven't went through their schedule with a fine-tooth comb, but when I look at it, this is a team that could be in the middle of the pack. And honestly, when I look at it, I sure hope the Big Ten can represent a lot better in March Madness this year, and I think they will. Last year, very young in the conference. We're going to go through a bunch more teams, but I think a common theme that you're going to talk about. Last year, a lot of youth in this conference. Now they're back. They're a year older. They're buying into systems with coaches. These guys have played together a little bit more. So I think you're going to see a little bit better play in the Big Ten this year, at least I hope. And Ohio State is one of those teams where I'm going to keep my eye on them. But right now, like I said, it's early. It's 10 games in. They really haven't done much for me to say, ooh, Ohio State's a scary national team. To me, they're a middle-of-the-pack Big Ten team right now, Kevin.
Yeah, fair enough. Moving on, and you mentioned, the youth in this conference from a year ago and how they're all getting older. And we moved to the number 16 team in the country, right behind Ohio State, is your Wisconsin Badgers, Troy. So they're 8-2. 8-2. They go about 8 deep, and all 8 of those guys are back from a year ago. Yep. There's no freshman in the top 8 in terms of minutes per game with this team. They lost to Virginia by 7. They lost to Marquette in overtime. Those are their 2 losses. Ethan Haas, the senior this year.
Pretty good this year. I know this is a Big Ten show, but I'm a Wisconsin guy. As you went to school and spent some time there, that Marquette team's pretty good. That's a good Marquette team. So that loss is not a bad loss. And you lose to Virginia, that's not a bad loss either. Again, you got to take a look at their schedule, though, Kevin.
Right.
Am I saying, oh, my God, 8-2 Wisconsin, woo, here we go, another run at the Final Four? Nah, not quite. I think Wisconsin is a middle-of-the-pack team, but they've got some veteran leadership, and I believe that if they could pull off an upset or two, maybe they can finish in that 4 or 5 range. But right now, they've got a lot of people coming back, but you have to remember, Kevin, some of these guys were hurt last year too. They were decimated by injury last year, which is no excuse. Even when they were healthy, I didn't think they – because if you remember the preview show, I wasn't sold on Wisconsin as a fan last year even. So It's exciting as a fan. But again, I think Wisconsin is a middle-of-the-pack team. They're 8-2, so they're going to get some votes. Do I think they're the 16th best team in the country? No. Fringe 25 right now? Yeah, I'll put them there. But I don't think they're 16. I think they're over. I don't want to say overrated. I think they're ranked higher than their talent is right now, based on what I've seen. And being a fan, I follow the Badgers religiously. So, hey, I'm happy they're ranked 16th, but I think it's higher than they really should be. But I'm okay with that as a fan. I'll take it.
Yeah.
But Wisconsin will be fun to watch. Again, returning a lot of guys that have had a year under their belt. I know last year we even talked about it on this show. They're going to take their lumps. They're going to take their jabs. They're going to get knocked out a few times. But what a great learning experience, especially when all those injuries happen, for the young guys to get to play. So, yeah, they took their lumps last year, and I think they're going to be much better. But, again, when I think it all unfolds throughout a long Big Ten season, I think they're a middle-of-the-pack team. Carry on.
Fair enough. They have so far. They've went to Xavier and won. They beat Stanford. They beat Oklahoma. They beat NC State. They went to Iowa, who's better this year, and they won. And most importantly, maybe, Troy, last year they lost to Rutgers. This year they've beaten Rutgers already. So that's a step in the right direction from a year ago.
How many did Rutgers win in the conference last year? I know one was against Wisconsin because that was a great show when we did that one.
They won 3 games. They were 3-15 last year.
Yeah. And one against my Wisconsin Badgers.
Yeah.
Woo! Yeah,
also
they beat Rutgers. But again, there's where I'm saying. The 16th team in the country should beat Rutgers, but I don't think they're the 16th best team. You named some solid programs off, but that's not Stanford of 5 years ago. It's not Oklahoma of 6 years ago. These are solid programs, but not nationally dominating programs. They're good, solid college programs. And that's good, though, because a year ago they probably would have lost all those, and they'd be like 3-7. So it's nice to see. But, again, the names, you read them off, and the fans are going, well, that's a good win. That's a good win. Yeah, they're big-time schools, but they're where their basketball program is in 2018-19, it's not dominating. But it's good for Wisconsin to get those wins.
Yeah, 100% correct. Last year, I want to mention this too. I'm going to mention the overall records of all these teams. And last year in the non-conference, Rutgers was 12-4. So just because teams are 8-2, 7-3, Rutgers was 12-4. Okay, so don't take non-conference schedule to mean much. And if there's somewhat of an outlier, I'll mention it. This team hasn't played anyone. This team has played teams. That's why they're only 7-3. It's something like that. But anyway, Wisconsin in general, like I was saying, Ethan Happ had a triple-double his first game. That was, an indication of things to come, I think, because so far he's averaging 19, 10, and 5 assists. So he is absolutely the leader of this team, obviously. He's a senior. He's got a bunch of, basically sophomores, really, alongside him. Demetric Trice is one of them.
He's got a supporting cast now. Last year he didn't. Last year he was expected to be the guy. The numbers you're reading off, that's what they wanted last year with no help around him. So how many times last year, Kevin, did we watch games with Wisconsin? You could double Hap or even triple team Hap and force somebody else to beat you. Yep. And there was nobody else to beat you. This year, you got guys stepping up that can that can drain a 20-foot jump shot, that can get another rebound. So it changes the whole philosophy of another team. But last year, all you did, you just put guys down in the post to guard Hap when he goes down there, and you double team him. If you play man-to-man, you can play man-to-man, and you can cheat. You can cheat to Hap because there was nobody else on that team last year that could do anything to take the pressure off of him. So, again, that's why it's exciting as a fan, Kevin. There's guys early in the season doing some good things, which bodes well for Wisconsin Badgers fans.
Yeah. Dimitri Trice is really that other guy that they can go to now. And a year ago, he was just a freshman. Now he's a sophomore, 16 points a game, 55% shooting from three. But that's dangerous. And then you got guys like Brad Davison, Kobe King, Khalil Iverson. You've got other guys, Nate Rovers. This team's got other guys who have been in the system now for a year. That's really the difference, and Trice has definitely taken a step up. That much is easy to acknowledge. Next on the list is 7-2 Iowa, and they're next on the list because they're ranked number 22 in the country, which is very weird because this was one of the worst teams in the Big Ten a year ago. I was higher on them than you were, and probably most people were going into last year, and they proved me wrong because they were bad last year. This year, they're 7-2. In terms of wins, they've beaten Oregon, who was a top 15 team early in the season. They also beat Iowa State. They put up 98 points. This team, Iowa, what are they, second? Yeah, they're second in the Big Ten in scoring right now at 82 a game. So this team can score, and they can shoot, and it's interesting. So far they lost to Wisconsin by 6, and then they got drilled by Michigan State by 22. But they've got a couple decent wins in there. They can score the ball. They're going 10 deep. So they're wanting to run and shoot and utilize bodies, and they have bodies to use. Team leader, probably Tyler Cook, is 6'9" forward. I believe he's a sophomore. I believe he might be a junior. Forgot. Averaging 16 and 8. Luke Garza is a 6'11" big who you have to respect. Joe Wiskamp is a freshman guard who's 6'6". He's averaging 10 a game. So this team has shooters. They want to score. They want to get up and down the court more often than not. And they can play with teams like Oregon, who was in the top 15, Iowa State, who's traditionally a good program, and they can win. They can score with them. So Iowa has definitely taken a step up from a year ago. I think this is probably a tournament team. Are they the 22nd best team in the country? That might be stretching it. But, again, I think this is probably a tournament team if all things are equal. I think if their schedule is rough in the Big Ten, we'll know that later down the line when we know more about these teams. But I think this is one of the best 68 teams in the country. And I know that's not perfect because you've got conference winners in there that dilute that. But I think they're a tournament caliber team this year. And a year ago, they absolutely were not.
Oh, yeah. They were far from sniffing March Madness last year, my friend. But the thing that intrigues me about this year's Iowa team, I'm trying to remember the last time that you associated run and gun with Iowa.
Right.
I mean, I'm an old school guy. When it was Wisconsin versus Iowa, it's like, man, how are we going to guard the guy in the middle? Because when I was basically going through college in my younger years, Wisconsin never had a dominating big man. So it's like, man, we're playing Iowa. We're going to lose because they're just going to feed the ball to the post, and the guy's going to score 35 and have 15 rebounds, and he's going to block like 8 shots. That was Iowa basketball. And I don't want to say they would just plod along and they would just feed it into the post, but the perception was that's Iowa basketball. You're going to start with the big man, and then we're going to fill in around the big man with some guys that can shoot from the outside. And Iowa's had a decent program over the years, but to me, Iowa always had that guy that was big in the middle that was really good. And when you look at this year's team, like you said, Kevin, they're playing 10. They want to score 80. They're still going to play defense. But when you're running that fast, honestly, when you want to score 80, you've got to sacrifice some things defensively because if you're going to score 80, it means you're not running the shot clock down to 5. You're not getting into – I mean, you're going to get into set pieces, but you're not going to cross the timeline, put 2 fingers up and say, run 2, run 2. you're going to play in the flow of the game. You're trying to create turnovers defensively, and you're trying to up tempo. And when you do that, if you shoot and miss, you've got to get back defensively quickly, and other teams are going to try to play into your hand and run and gun with you. And sometimes you sacrifice a little bit defensively there. I still believe that this Iowa team is going to be a good defensive team, but the thing is, I don't want to say they don't want to play defense, but that's not going to be their staple this year. It's going to play a lot of guys, run their legs off, and we're going to try to outscore you. And to me, that's totally different than the Iowa Hawkeye teams that I've known from the past. So it will be exciting. Now, again, this is the theme, and I sound like a broken record. Young guys coming back. Will Iowa be better? Yes. So I've got a lot of middle-of-the-pack teams. But some of these middle-of-the-pack teams, some of them got to separate themselves, and we'll find out more as the season goes along. The problem for Iowa right now, they've already got 2 conference losses. Not bad losses. They played 2 good teams, but they still count. So they're already behind the 8 ball a little bit before we get into the full-fledged Big Ten conference season. So they've already put themselves behind the 8 ball as far as the conference is concerned. Now, again, not bad losses, but still 2 losses in the conference. You're 2 games back already of the leaders. And you're at, I know you're tied with other teams, but you're smack dab at the bottom of the Big Ten. So you've got to move your way out. So they're already behind the 8 ball. But again, this is a team, Kevin, depending on how the season goes, like you said, middle of the pack. And I kind of foreshadowed it before. I'm thinking the play in the Big Ten is going to be better this year. I think the representation in March Madness is going to be more this year. So when I'm talking middle of the pack teams, I'm talking tournament teams. So everybody that I said is middle of the pack Big Ten, to me, I'm talking tournament. And if I say bottom tier, they're done. They're not a tournament team in my mind. So I put Iowa in there, and they should take a step up. That's all I got. Continue.
Yeah, last year there were 4 Big Ten teams that made the tournament. That's insanely low for any Power 5 conference, but especially the Big Ten in basketball. That to have 4, I would have to go back and look to see the last time they had 4.
We should have just marketed this show, Youngster, as an all-night Big Ten basketball show, because you bring that up, and now I've got to say this point because I'm getting old and I'll forget. Yep. The reason to me, and we talked about it at the end of last year, the reason to me they only got 4 teams in the tournament is there was good teams in the Big Ten, young good teams in the Big Ten, and what happened is 5 through 10 beat each other up. They'd win, they'd lose. They'd win, they'd lose. And so what happened is you got teams that are all fluttering around 500 in the Big Ten, or Nebraska winning 10, or was it 12, but against crap teams. But the other teams that were good, everybody was kind of molded into the same place last year in that 5 through 10 slot. And on any given night, 10 could beat 5, 5 could beat 10, blah, 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 and that's what happened. So you didn't have any teams being able to separate themselves out of that bottom tier of the Big Ten. So now this year, you've got to look at where are the teams that had youth that were in that 5 through 10, and maybe even 11, 12, 13. You go in there because Wisconsin was way down there. But to me, that's the reason why the Big Ten looked so crappy last year. It wasn't that they were bad. It was just that you've had a lot of youth and a lot of teams on a very similar skill set, very good, and they just kept beating each other up. That's why I think this year it's a lot deeper. These guys are talented. They've played one more year in the system, and I think you see a lot more teams from the Big Ten get into the dance. Continue.
Yeah, 100% agreed. I think we're seeing at least 7 teams make the NCAA tournament this year. So if they doubled it and 8 teams made it, wouldn't shock me. I think it's that much of a different conference this year because you're getting so many more younger teams that are just improving, realistically. The Michigans, the Michigan States, they're there. but teams like Indiana, teams like Ohio State, teams like Wisconsin, they're all improving. Iowa, all improving. Moving on, speaking of which, to Indiana, number 25 in the country. That's the 6th team now in the top 25 from the Big Ten we're talking about here. Again, this is 10 games in. This is not preseason, means nothing. This is 10 games in. A third of the schedule is done already. Of course, conference play will change things, but there are 6 teams that America thinks is in the top 25. So to say 7 make the tournament, not exactly a stretch. Anyway, with Indiana, the leader for the Hoosiers this year, and it is a freshman, Romeo Langford. This is Archie Miller's second year, and he got a monstrous recruit in Langford. He was a top 5 recruit no matter where you look. He'll be in the NBA next year. There's no doubt about it. Averaging 18 points a game, 5 rebounds a game as a guard. He's an NBA player. No question about it. So Archie Miller is certainly winning in the recruiting trails, and you've seen that outside of Langford as well. They have other quality guys. Another one's a freshman.
Isn't that why they brought Archie in, though, youngster?
Yeah.
To land those big-time guys like he just did. When's the last time you can say Illinois had one of the top recruits in the country? I can't remember ever.
Indiana, yeah. Yeah. No, I know. Yeah, it's been a long time. Rob Finney is a freshman point guard. He's also going to be good. So they're 8-2 right now. They lost to Arkansas by 1, who's a quality program, makes a tournament every year nowadays. And they lost to Duke, who everyone loses to Duke, unless you're Gonzaga.
Who did they lose to? Who's Duke?
Yeah, I don't know.
Who's Duke? Is that a good win? Is that a good loss? I don't know. I'm kidding, fans. I'm kidding, fans. I say that because the youngster is a diehard Duke fan. So don't get on me like, oh, what are you doing? No. So, I look at that, Kevin, and I'll just give 2 cents, and then you can finish up here with Illinois. You look at a game with some freshmen against a dominating Duke team. I mean, you lose, right? But it's an Illinois program that
Indiana.
Subpar, or Indiana, I'm sorry. So you look at a kind of a subpar team that is looking to find their way, and they've got these young guys that are good players, right? You go up against Duke, that's the measuring stick. They're nowhere near Duke's level. But when you're a player, and you can attest to this, Kevin, being an athlete, at least I did, when we played teams that were better than us, and you kind of know in your head, like, we've got to play our A-plus game to even have a chance, and even if we play A-plus, we might lose. When that game was over, even though we lost and I hated losing, I found some solace knowing that I stood toe-to-toe with guys from the other team position-wise. That made me feel good. And so when I look at a loss to a Duke team, when you're a middle of the pack to a bottom-tier team in the Big Ten, there's never a moral victory, but for those young guys to go out there and see where the bar is, that's got to give them some confidence, knowing that position-wise, they can play with the best in the country. And so that's what kind of why I made fun of it. They played Duke, didn't win, but with young guys, if they were out there playing, they know now where the bar is. They can get a little bit of confidence, even though they lost. And that's going to prepare them for the Big Ten. This is a team, Kevin, that I look at, and with these young guys, we talk about the Big Ten getting older. It's almost like they got a little bit younger, but talent-wise, those guys are equivalent to a lot of juniors. So it'll all depend on how these young guys mature over the course of a Big Ten season. Because right now it's kind of the honeymoon stage for them. Playing college ball, playing a non-conference schedule. Now let's get into the wear and tear of the Big Ten. Now let's get into the physical conference play that you're going to have night in, night out. You're going to have elbows in the chest. You're going to have bodies upon bodies. And we'll see how these young guys can make it through a Big Ten season. But this is a team you got to watch out for because they've got young talent. And how far
Absolutely.
will it take them? I don't know.
Yeah, they're a tournament team. Are they the number 25 team in the country? Probably. They've beaten Louisville so far. They're 2-0 in the Big Ten with wins over Northwestern and Penn State, which are a couple bottom dwellers this year. But 2-0 in the Big Ten, and they also beat Marquette by 23 points. So Indiana can play. Just because you lose to Arkansas by 1 and you lose to Duke by 20, which basically everyone loses to Duke by 20.
Losing to Duke by 20, youngster, is like losing to a comparable team of your talent level by like 2.
Right.
I mean, Duke literally blows everybody out.
Right.
So that's why I said with my little analogy, yeah, they lost the game. But you have to find the confidence level from these kids going like, could be the best team in college basketball. How do we stack up position by position? And, over the course of a 40-minute game, you're not going to stand up against Duke if you don't have that solid roster. And they don't have it yet. But they've got individuals that can carry that team that held their own.
Right. And in the NCAA tournament, could they beat a team like Duke? It's possible. We saw UMBC beat Virginia. It's possible that Indiana beats Duke. Is it possible that Indiana wins their Elite Eight game against Duke and then they beat Michigan State in the Final Four and then they beat Kansas in the title game? No. Indiana's not a title contender. And I guess I stopped talking about that. But, like, Iowa's not a title contender. I don't think Wisconsin's a title contender. I don't think Ohio State's a title contender. Maybe there is only 2 in Michigan and Michigan State. Would you agree with that? Michigan State, otherwise no one else is really winning the title this year?
Well, I think you brought up a really good point about how the tournament is laid out.
Yeah.
Could these teams that we just talked about, outside of Michigan State and Michigan, could they go back to back to back against the big boys and have a legitimate shot to win those games? The answer is no. Could they pull off an upset? Yes. And here's the crazy thing about the tournament, Kevin. Depending on where they're at in the bracket, if there's another major upset on the bottom of the bracket, maybe they don't have to play another juggernaut. So you never know what's going to happen in March. But these teams we're talking about, Indiana included, could they pull off that upset? Of course. They've got talent to do it. But could they go toe-to-toe with the big boys day in and day out? No. They don't have that firepower. But to win one game, to win one 40-minute game, yeah, every team we've talked about so far could do that because they've got talented guys that can allow that to happen. It's a great point you brought up, youngster.
Yeah, it's very rare to have Michigan's run to the title game a year ago. And it's not a bash on Michigan, but their toughest game seed-wise was in the second round. The third round, they played a 7 seed. The Elite Eight, they played a 9 seed. The Final Four, they played an 11 seed. That never happened.
And you know what, Kevin? We would have said the same thing about Michigan, what I just said. Can Michigan make a title run? No. They can't play with the big boys toe-to-toe every day, night in and night out. But things fell in their favor in the national tournament. Yeah, that happened. Look what happened though when they got to where they had to go. And then you kind of found out what happened.
Yeah, just wanted to kind of parallel what we were talking about there. Indiana, is there anything else I'm missing here? Juwan Morgan's a senior. It seems like he's been there for 7 years. He's averaging 15 and 8. So you've got a senior leader there, the senior forward who can do a bit of everything. So that's good. Again, I think this is a top 25 team. It's a tournament team. Are they dangerous to win the whole thing? No. But they're dangerous on any given night to beat anybody. I do think that's the case. Moving on, finally, outside the top 25 to our 7th team here, I put Nebraska ahead of the other 2 8-2 teams because I think Nebraska is better than the other 2 8-2 teams currently. That's just the way I see it. But Nebraska 8-2, they lost to Texas Tech by 18 points. That was a bit of a yikes. And they lost to Minnesota by 7. Minnesota's interesting, but Nebraska should have won that game. People think Nebraska is a top 25 team realistically, and I wouldn't disagree with that. I think that they've had a couple slip-ups, and it's hard to say that, well, maybe that's what Nebraska is, because only 10 games in and you've got a couple losses to teams you should have beaten. What does that say about Nebraska? But I really do think this is a tournament team this year. And I don't think they go 12-4 in conference again, but I think this is a tournament team. I think they win 20 games.
A little different conference schedule this year for Nebraska.
Yeah.
A little bit different. Yeah, they're not winning 12 in the conference.
No, they won't. But, again, I think you'll pick up more quality victories as the year goes along, and the committee showed last year that matters. It absolutely does. They're averaging 80 points a game. They go about 9 deep. This team, again, getting older. Their top 3 players are all seniors. They've got 2 guards that are seniors. James Palmer, a senior, 18 points a game. Isaac Copeland, a forward, 14 points a game. Glenn Watson, the other guard, 14 points a game as well. Those 3 seniors will lead the way, and you will pick up a number of impressive victories in the Big Ten because you've got 3 seniors leading the way. And they know what it's like to win in the Big Ten. They did it a year ago. Now, will competition be a bit harder than it was a year ago? I'm sure their schedule will be harder, like Troy said. But you've got 3 seniors who can all absolutely play. So I like this Nebraska team this year. I was very skeptical. We were both skeptical of them a year ago. But this year's team, they're a year older, and they're when you have 3 seniors leading your team in college basketball, and they're all legitimate seniors. I mean, they're not, just having the label of a senior. These 3 guys can play. If that's the case in college basketball, you're going to beat some decent teams, because there will be teams that are more talented than them that are younger, that because their top 3 players are seniors, you'll beat them on occasion, even though you're outclassed talent.
Yeah, now Cornhusker fans, don't be punching your ticket to the Final Four. When I say this, don't be punching the ticket to the Final Four. But think back, Kevin, being a Wisconsin fan, think back to when they made their Final Four runs. Why did Wisconsin make those runs? Yeah, Kaminsky, he played very good in the tournament. But you look at those teams when they made those Final Four runs, they were juniors and then they were seniors. They were senior heavy. They were upper class heavy. And they've been there. They were battle tested. They knew the system. They knew what they had to do. They were experienced. They weren't the most talented team in that tournament, even though they were ranked. A lot of time it was the experience that they had that allowed them to make those deep runs. Now, again, Cornhusker fans, I'm not saying Nebraska's going to the Final Four. I'm just saying that when you have a senior-heavy team, good things can happen because they've played together, they know the system, they know what to expect, and they're going to go out and play. So I didn't want to say that's an exact comparison, youngster, but those Wisconsin teams that I followed and follow all the time, they weren't always the most talented team. They had good players, but it was the experience in my mind as I watched them progress year to year to year. You could see them get better. And that's what I see with Nebraska. I agree with you. I think Nebraska, as long as they can take care of business against teams they need to take care of business against, a.k.a. Rutgers, I mean, that's one of them. Yeah, and I just throw it out there because that's the most blatant one. But you got to beat teams like that. You got to do what they did a year ago. But then when you start playing against some of the boys on the same page as you, the Wisconsins, the Iowas, the Indianas, you've got to pull off some of those wins. And you can't be just in close ones and lose by 1 or lose by a last-second shot. No, you got to win, right? And so as a senior, you've been there, you've experienced it. Nothing is going to be new when it comes down to the wire. Because, again, I'm sounding like a broken record, middle-of-the-pack teams. Who's going to separate themselves? We talk about Nebraska last year. Yeah, they won 12. But you were absolutely right, Kevin. We never drank the Cornhusker wine. We never drank it. We never bought into it because they weren't really separating themselves from the other good teams. They couldn't do that. But now they've got a year under their belt, and I see different fortunes for them. But until they play the games, we don't know. On paper, on this show, they should be better. Could they separate out of the middle of the pack with 3 seniors leading the way? Yes, they could. But they're still a middle-of-the-pack team to me. And there's a lot of middle-of-the-pack teams to me. So carry on.
Yeah, I hear you. That'll be the difference. Is you'll have 2 or 3 middle of the pack teams not make it. You'll have 2 or 3 bottom dwellers obviously not make it. You'll have 2 or 3 middle of the pack teams just perform poorly in conference play a couple times too many, and boom, you're out of the tournament. Yeah, you've got some of the top dogs in the conference, and a couple teams will get hot and will be in the top 25, and then you'll have 2 or 3 that just make the tournament. Because they were 11-6, and they had a few nice Big Ten wins, and they got to the second round or third round of the Big Ten tournament, and it's like, yep, that team's in resume-wise. That'll be the case, So these middle of the pack teams, that's where it's won and lost in terms of getting to the tournament and not. Can you beat the Minnesotas and the Indianas and the Iowas of the world? If you don't and you lose all those games, then you'll be on the wrong side of the middle of the pack. That's kind of how I see it. But so Nebraska finishing up, they've got a few guys outside of the seniors as well. Isaiah Roby, Thomas Allen, and a freshman, I believe, Nana Hackinton. They're all doing well as well so far this year. But, again, we're only 10 games in. But this team's got, I think, a bright future ahead of them, and I think they will make the tournament. Moving on, Minnesota also 8-2. Like I said, you've got a couple more 8-2 teams here. Minnesota's 8-2, and this was another team that I liked a year ago, and you didn't like them as much, Troy, and as you were right again, you shouldn't have liked them as much as I did a year ago. They also had guys with issues like arrests and stuff like that, and they had a big injury as well, a little past halfway through the year, so that hurt them too, but they never really gelled the way I thought they could have. But this year, so far, 8-2, they beat Nebraska. They lost to Boston College, which was suspect in the Big Ten ACC Challenge, and they also lost to Ohio State by 20. That's not a good sign going forward, but they play around 9 guys usually, and you got guys like Amir Coffey, Jordan Murphy, those guys we've heard of. Dupree McBriar as a guard. He's a senior. He's averaging 10 a game. Coffey and Murphy, 14 and 12. There's a freshman guard they have in Gabe Kalsher, averaging 10 a game as well. That's 4 guys averaging 10 a game. And then you've got another freshman big, Daniel Orturu, who scored, 25 or something I remember reading a game ago. He's averaging 9 and 7. Isaiah Washington's another good guard who's a sophomore. He showed promise as a freshman a year ago. So this team has players. They're not 8-2 by accident. They're definitely going to be better than they were a year ago. This is one of those middle-of-the-pack teams that if things break their way and talent proves to be good enough, then you could see Minnesota making the tournament. I don't know if they will or not, but this is one of those middle-of-the-pack teams that if they beat the teams they're supposed to and they pull a couple upsets, they'll be in the tournament because they will look like a talented team. They're a talented team, but when you lose to Boston College and you lose to Ohio State by 20, that's not favorable. So, again, that's my overall thought here is, can this team make the tournament? Sure. Can they miss the tournament? Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, my thought on Minnesota right now is, again, it's 10 games, and can you really get a good feel for a team before the conference season begins? My answer is maybe, but I'm not putting a lot of stock into it. But the one thing that you're seeing is the inconsistency that you just talked about. And can they put together a consistent run in the Big Ten? That's going to be the key. Can they do that, or are they just going to be in the bottom tier? Because they very well could be. You mentioned some of the wins. You mentioned some of the losses. It's just very inconsistent right now. And you get that sometimes with young guys. So based on fact, which is the games that they've played, I'm seeing that this is not one of those teams like the ones we just talked about that have taken that next step to a consistent level of play. They can play very well. We've seen that. They can be a very good team, but they can be a very bad team. And so right now, to me, they haven't made that progression, Kevin, to the next step. And we'll find out when the Big Ten conference schedule starts. Can they do it? So in the first 10, if it's any indication, my answer is no, they can't do it. Because that's what this, I'm air quoting, the preseason is for, to get ready for the Big Ten. And if you're seeing inconsistency in the first 10 games, what is out there to prove to me that all of a sudden they're going to turn a light switch on and in the Big Ten they're going to be consistent and they're going to be the 5th or 6th best team? There's nothing to prove that right now. Nothing at all. So it'll be interesting to see what Minnesota does. But again, it's like a lot of teams we talked about. You can't just lay down with Minnesota, because if they play their A game, they're going to beat you. But if they don't, you're going to crush them. That's what I'm seeing so far from this Minnesota team. And again, I don't know if you can turn a light switch on and off. So with those first 10 games, as much as I say they don't mean anything, as a team, you're trying to figure a lot of things out. And I don't think Minnesota's figured it out yet, Kevin. They figured out that, hey, we can play good basketball, but then they forget how to play basketball and they get crushed. So we'll see. They've got about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, to turn this around and turn the light switch on. I don't know if they can do it because they've had 10 games to try and figure it out. And again, that's what these games before the conference season to me are all about. And Minnesota has just kind of went about its business. Like, we got some talent, but we don't have it all together yet. We'll see what happens. Carry on.
Yeah, 3 weeks until January 1st. So that's basically when Big Ten play really kicks into gear. We've got, Troy, I'm curious here for your thought here. We've got 6 teams left. My thought is we can go through, because we're already past an hour here. If you want to talk about the next 3, I think they're all interesting. And then if you want to wrap up with the bottom 3 on next week's show, and we can obviously talk about other stuff as well, basketball-wise. But it's up to you. Would you want to run through the last 6? Or I've got them bunched up as 3 interesting teams, 3 teams that are at the bottom.
Let's just do it all. Let's just finish them all up together.
Fair enough. Maryland, 8-2. Another 8-2 team. It's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 teams that are 7-2 or better. Again, overall record, non-conference, take from it what you will. But Maryland right now, 8-2. They played Virginia. They lost by 5. They played Purdue. They lost by 2. So 2 losses that are not exactly poor. Have they beaten anyone? The answer is no. They haven't beaten anyone. So, again, we don't know a ton about this team. But what we do know, they go about 8 deep. There are 4 guys averaging 10-plus a game. Again, the competition hasn't been fantastic, but against the 2 teams that have been good, they've lost close. So take from that what you will. Anthony Cohen, a guy that has been here before, 16 points a game. Bruno Fernando could have been an NBA player a year ago, decided to come back. He's a big they have, averaging 14 and 9. And then you've got a couple freshmen averaging 10 points a game. Jalen Smith averaging 10 and 7, and Aaron Wiggins. People probably know the last name Wiggins. Aaron Wiggins, now a freshman at Maryland, averaging 10 a game. And then you've got a couple other guys averaging 9 and 8, respectively, a sophomore, a freshman. So this team's got a couple older leaders in Cohen and Fernando. Fernando's definitely an NBA guy. And then you've got some youthful, talented guys. So, again, figuring things out. You've got a couple leaders there at the top for Maryland, but otherwise it's young guys who have talent. So that explains losses to Virginia and Purdue, in my opinion. So this is, again, another middle-of-the-road team who, if they get their act together and the freshmen and sophomores really figure it out, they could be dangerous and they could be a tournament team. If not, they won't make the tournament. It's that simple.
See, it's funny, youngster, because you were talking about a couple of these teams that I wasn't so high on last year, and now we're talking about Maryland near the bottom because they're not ranked in the top 25, blah, 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 blah. I like this Maryland team. This is a Maryland team, Kevin, I think that can surprise people, and I think it's a Maryland team with talent that can actually separate themselves. Now, again, I'm not saying to win a Big Ten title, but I'm saying to get out of that middle of the pack, to get out of that, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 traffic jam. I think Maryland can be up in that 4, 5, 6 range, maybe even 3. That's how high I am on this Maryland team. I know it wasn't a great year last year, but we talked about it. They had some young guys. They're trying to figure out life after Trumbull, life after the man that was of Maryland. Oh, my gosh. Leave it alone. Give it a break. I think they figured it out. They had their highs and lows last year. I think this team is ready to go out and actually be a very consistent Big Ten team. So I don't know how high a lot of people are on them, but I think they're going to be one of those teams that can make that separation out of the middle of the pack. So you said you're thinking 7 teams in the big dance, Kevin. I'm thinking this Big Ten team with as many teams that I'm high on right now. I think the Big Ten could stretch it to 8. I really believe that. I believe they could get 8 in, and I really like this Maryland team. We've already talked about Wisconsin, Ohio State, Iowa. I mean, there are teams that are good teams. My only concern is the same thing that happened last year. You play a 2-game series, Maryland, and again, I don't have the schedule in front of me, but I'm just going to use this. So I'm a Wisconsin fan. So Maryland plays Wisconsin at Wisconsin. Wisconsin wins. Wisconsin plays at Maryland. Maryland wins. All of a sudden, you've got a bunch of teams in the middle of the Big Ten that are sitting there that are at 500 or one game under 500. And the committee's going to look at them and say, you're not that good. And then they get 5 teams in instead of 8 or 9 that are well-deserving. Because I really believe that this conference is deep this year. And I think you can tell, Kevin, when I get passionate about something, the octaves in my voice go up, and that's where I'm at. I really like this conference. I think you're going to see a lot of great basketball this year, and I like this Maryland team. That's all I got.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm with you. Northwestern. Finally, a team with 3 losses.
Well, there's where my enthusiasm ends right there.
Yeah, it's sad because 2 years ago they were a darling of the college basketball world, and then a year ago they just kind of, as you say, pooed the bed. So this year you lost a couple of those older guys. Now you have guys like Vic Law, guys like Derek Perdone. Those are guys that are proven. And you've got a couple others averaging 12 and 11 points per game as well, Ryan Taylor, A.J. Turner. But Vic Law, Derek Perdone.
On their cupcake schedule, youngster, on their cupcake Northwestern schedule, they're going to average points. I'm just going to interrupt right here because anybody that's listening to the show knows Northwestern, recruiting-wise, admissions-wise, you've got to be smart to go to Northwestern. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a great academic school. They've done good athletically, too. They've done very good, and there are a lot of great athletes that are very intelligent. My point is, Northwestern is not going out to get the one-and-done guy or the 2 years in school to develop 1 year and then bolt to the NBA guy. Northwestern needs to have 5 solid guys. They had that went through the program together, and now they don't have that. This could be a very long year for Northwestern in my mind, Kevin.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. It could get ugly, but I would like to say that Law and Perdone and these other guys, I think they can win some games. Are they going to be toward the bottom of the conference? Yes. They're not. To me, they won't make the tournament. Last year really should have been their year where it's like, we're a top 25 team. We're going to push for the Sweet 16. That's what should have happened a year ago, and it didn't. For whatever reason, it didn't. So now
you said it perfectly. You said it. You should say it again because I think the first time I ever heard you say it. They pooed the bed. That's what they did.
Yeah.
And that was their run. I mean, yeah, they've got good players. They're not going to be the laughing stock of the Big Ten, and they're not going to be a pushover.
Right.
But they're not a middle of the pack team to me. They're at the bottom of the Big Ten. And when I say bottom, I want fans to realize I'm talking and I'm grouping teams together when I talk about bottom of the Big Ten. Or maybe I can just put Rutgers at the basement, and then these teams are like one step above Rutgers, I guess.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Fair enough. Moving on. Northwestern, last thing I wanted to say, you've got those couple of seniors at the top. You got I believe, a fifth-year senior transfer, and then you've got younger guys. And they're only going 7 deep. This isn't a Michigan 7 deep. This is a Northwestern 7 deep, and that shows the guys they lost. So struggling shooting as well early on this season. Could be the worst of the middle of the pack teams. It could be. I'm not saying it is, but it could be. The next in line for me for the Big Ten, I just went record-wise here, Purdue at 6-4. I think Purdue's better than Northwestern, but they're next on my list because of their record right now, which, again, does not mean much because their 4 losses have come against number 16 Virginia Tech by 6 points. They lost to number 15 at the time, Florida State, by 1. They lost at Michigan by 19, but at Michigan is tough. And they also lost at Texas by 4. So they've also beaten Maryland by 2. Maryland was ranked at the time. So they have shown that they can beat decent teams, but the teams that have been ranked and they've played, they have lost outside of Maryland. So at Texas, also not exactly a bad loss by 4
points. And that's the big difference between this year's Purdue team and last year's, Kevin. That's what I'm seeing early in the season. Do I think they're a good middle-of-the-pack team? Definitely. It's Purdue. And I think they put together a good program. The problem is they don't have that hammer in the hand instinct this year. Last year they had the hammer in the hand and they pounded the nail in the coffin. This year they're searching for the hammer to pound the nail, and what happens is they get lost trying to find the hammer and then they lose. So they don't have that killer instinct this year, and that's going to hurt them. That is going to hurt them. Now, the thing is, when I look at Purdue comparative to a Wisconsin and Ohio State and Indiana, I put them on the same level. Are they better than Wisconsin? Maybe. Definitely on the same level as a Wisconsin, because Wisconsin needs to prove it to me, as crappy as they were last year. Are they as good as Indiana? Maybe. Because, again, Indiana needs to prove it to people, right? So this is a Purdue team, Kevin, that in the Big Ten, maybe they can be up near 3 or 4, but right now they're struggling against really good teams that are in the top 25. And it's because I don't think they have the killer instinct on this year's team. It's still a good team. And it could be a team, if things fall right, that they could be a 3, 4, 5 in the Big Ten, because talent-wise, they're hanging in with all those other middle-of-the-pack teams. But what I just said, if it's a close game, do they have the killer instinct to put a Wisconsin away, to put an Ohio State away? I don't know the answer yet. Again, we're going to talk about fact. We're 10 games in. If we're going to talk based on history, no, they can't do it, which means that Purdue's dominance in the Big Ten near the top, 1, 2, 3, is done, because these middle-of-the-pack teams will take care of business. And again, I think this conference is so deep this year. Could you see Purdue finish 3rd or 4th? Yes. Could you see Purdue finish 8, 9, or 10? Yes. That's all I'm going to say there.
Yeah, I'll give my thoughts on them. I don't disagree with you there, what you're saying. They go about 9 deep, and you talk about the killer instinct. They've got one guy who's got a killer instinct, and Carson Edwards could have gone to the NBA a year ago, decided to stay, and so far this year he's averaging 25 points a game. That's a lot in college basketball. There will be 1 or 2 guys that average 25 a game, probably. There won't be more than 5 for sure. 25.
So let's piggyback off Edwards, Kevin. Let's go back and let's rewind 2 years in Purdue history, and you had a guy named Swanigan.
Yep.
When you have one guy doing all the work, does that guarantee a great season? Now, that team is different than the one that Edwards is on this year. We know why Edwards came back. He needs to work on his game so he can play in the next level at the NBA. I don't think he came back to play another year of college basketball just to hang out with his buddies. I don't think that's the reason why he came back. So, should he score 25? Yes. But what does he have around him this year, Kevin? He doesn't have that same supporting cast of 2 years ago, even 3 years ago, or last year. And that's the difference. Yeah, he's a great player. But one great player is not going to carry you to a Big Ten title.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you there. He's really good, and he's fantastic, and he will solely win them a few games this year. Ryan Klein averaging 13 a game as well. He's an older guy. He's money from three. He's only shooting 38% this year, but he'll be over 40, guaranteed. He can stroke it. Evan Boudreau is another interesting guy. Matt Harms is, 7'3"? I know I wrote it down. Yeah, he's 7'3". That's your new really interesting big at Purdue, but Matt Harms is averaging 8 points, 4 rebounds a game at 7'3". He's a sophomore. He's not as refined as the other guys Purdue has had as bigs in the past, but he gives you some size along with Edwards, Klein on the outside. Another really good guard is Nojel Eastern. He's a sophomore, but he is fantastic defensively. I think that Edwards and Eastern as a guard combo, along with Klein's sharpshooting ability, they can beat anyone in the country. I think they can. I think if Edwards gets hot and Klein's hitting shots and Eastern's playing defense the way he can, and Edwards is a good defender as well, and then you've got Harms on the inside to give you something in terms of length and size, this is a really interesting team. Is it the same level of supporting cast, like you said, Troy, as they've had in the past couple of years? No, it's not. But you've got some interesting, talented guys that are either really good offensively or really good defensively. So if everything goes right, not everything, but if they pull a couple upsets and they beat some of the teams they're supposed to, they should be in the tournament. This is a really interesting Purdue team this year. It's not one of the two best teams in the Big Ten like they've been the last couple of years, but it's a really interesting team, and it's a team I'm pulling forward to see in March. That's the way I'm going to put it. Last year, Penn State was kind of that team for us. This Purdue team's a little better than last year's Penn State team, but this is a team I really want to see make the tournament like Penn State was for us a year ago, Troy. Do you have a favorite that you're kind of pulling for, obviously outside of Wisconsin?
Not really. Like I said, it's funny because, I'm a Wisconsin guy, so I definitely want to see my Badgers get back into the NCAA tournament. But, again, now this is our third year doing Go Big or Go Home. I'm really cheering for the whole conference. I would like to see a record number of teams make it into the NCAA tournament this year. Problem you have is these teams are all bunched up together, and my worst nightmare is that they just pound on each other. And conference-wise, you're not going to have 9 teams that are above 500 in the conference. It's not going to happen. And right. I know that's one of the things that the committee looks at. And it's one of those things I look at. You go top to bottom, and somebody's got to be left out. But every team that we've talked about up to this point, excluding Northwestern, could have a shot to make the NCAA tournament. Like I said, I like Purdue. The problem is in these games against good competition, I'm just not seeing the same type confidence level that I saw the last 2 years with Purdue. And maybe with some experience, maybe losing those 4 games, Kevin, again, there's no moral victories because they count as losses, but maybe it will prepare them for the Big Ten season. And maybe they finish 3rd or 4th like I said they could. But based on fact, what if they don't? And what if they start dropping games to Wisconsin, to Ohio State, to Indiana? All of a sudden, you're sitting at, 6-8 in the Big Ten, 6-10, and all of a sudden, you're not even sniffing the national tournament, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. We call this cupcake schedule, and like I said, they have read off. They have not played a cupcake schedule, but losing every single one of those games could be the difference of them making and missing the tournament. Because if they are sitting there at 8-8, 9-9 in the Big Ten play, and they get to the second round and lose to Michigan in the Big Ten tournament, it's like, okay, what'd you do non-conference? Well, we played all these really good teams, and we lost all those games. That might be the difference, unfortunately, for Purdue. So you can write off the non-conference schedule for some teams, but for a team like Purdue that needs to get all the wins they can to get to 20 and prove they're a tournament team, if you're losing to all these good teams in the non-conference, that might end up biting them in the butt. So just wanted to point that out. We've got 3 teams left here. These 3 teams will not make the tournament. I'll say that.
Yeah, this will be pretty fast.
Yeah. Penn State is one of them, and I think they're interesting. They're the most interesting of these last 3, although Illinois is kind of interesting as well. But Penn State, 5-4, they go about 9 deep. One of the reasons they're 5-4, they were 3-2 in their first 5 games, and Mike Watkins, who is going to be a major contributor, was out those first 5 games. One of those games was to Bradley, and they lost that game. He's been back in these last 4 games. Obviously, they've only gone 2-2 in those games as well, so it hasn't been exactly perfect for Penn State. Penn State, again, they won't make the tournament, but they're interesting. They have some interesting players on their team. They beat Virginia Tech, who was ranked 13th at the time. Since Watkins has been back, they've also lost to Indiana by 2, and they've lost at Maryland by 7. So you can't really fault them for that, but it goes to show that they're going to lose to these middle-of-the-road teams more often than not. And that's what's going to make them a bottom dweller. So Penn State really, I was going to say Penn State's not a bad team. They're really not this year, but they're just going to lose more games than they're going to win when it comes to the middle of the pack in the Big Ten, because that's the middle of the pack of the Big Ten is that much stronger than it was a year ago. Just wanted to point that out.
It is, and what's going to cause separation in the middle of the pack is being able to win on the road. You and I both know, Kevin, doesn't matter if it's the Big Ten, doesn't matter if it's the ACC, doesn't matter what conference it is, you got to go on the road and win, because these teams, most college basketball teams, are fairly good. Not the good teams, and this is what I'm talking. The tournament teams are fairly good. Well, I shouldn't say fairly. Are really good at home. You know, the runs, and I'm sorry to the fans if I reference the Badgers a lot, but that's my team, so I follow them every day, Kevin. It's in my Google search bar, right? I'm typing in Wisconsin Badger basketball. Yeah. When they made those runs and all those years in the NCAA tournament, playing at Wisconsin, it was almost a W for Wisconsin. Almost. Not always, but a lot of times it was a W for Wisconsin because they were very difficult to beat at home. And that's what the middle-of-the-pack teams are. Really good at home, and they find a way to go on the road and maybe be 500 on the road. And if you can be 500 on the road as a middle-of-the-pack team, that means your record, as long as you're really good at home, you're going to be a few games over 500 in the Big Ten. Penn State, are they built to play on the road? In my mind, the answer is no, Kevin. You can't rely on one guy, especially at a level that Penn State's at, because they're just going to shut him down and make somebody else to beat you, a.k.a. Wisconsin Badgers last year. Hap's the guy. And so I'm kind of comparing Penn State this year, Kevin, to last year Wisconsin's team, where you got this one guy that can be really, really good and could be an all Big Ten team guy. But who's going to step up? You got good players, and Wisconsin had good players last year too. But they couldn't win close games, and they couldn't win on the road, and they weren't dominant at home. kind of reminds me of Penn State this year. That's all I got.
Yeah. I've got, to go through Penn State a little more in depth. Lamar Stevens is the leader for sure. He's an older guy averaging 20 and 8. There's a freshman guard, Rasir Bolton, averaging 13. There's another senior guard that they have, and Josh Reeves averaging 10. There's a freshman guard that's averaging 8. This team, again, they have some talent. They're just, against most middle-of-the-pack teams, they're probably going to lose. And on the road, like you said, those are the important ones that you have to win if you're going to separate yourself, and I just don't see Penn State doing it. So they're talented. They're interesting, but they're not a tournament team. Shooting-wise, 41% from the field, 31% from three so far. It's just not going to get it done against the solid teams, the decent teams of the Big Ten. It's more often than not, it's just not going to happen. Moving on to Rutgers, we've got two teams left here. Rutgers have over Illinois because of the overall record. It's Steve Picciol's third season as the coach at Rutgers, and they go 8 deep. And you're starting to see some guys. Eugene Omoruyi is a junior forward. He was part of Picciol's first class. He's now leading the team. He's 15-8 or 15-9. Geo Baker's a sophomore, so another Picciol guy, averaging 14 a game. And then you've got a few other interesting guys as well, all recruited by Picciol. They're interesting. And Ron Harper Jr. is a freshman. This team is not as bad, I think, as they were a couple years ago.
The question is, Kevin, will they win more than 3 games in the Big Ten?
I think so. I think that this team has more talent now than it did a year ago. And whether that's, not necessarily with freshmen, but all these guys are older now. And they added, an interesting freshman here and there. So I think that this team, again, will you lose to Michigan State? Yeah, they lost to Michigan State. They lost to Michigan State by 11. They lost at Wisconsin by 5. This team, they've beaten Miami. There's no other interesting wins, but I think that this team is not as terrible as we're historically have seen the last couple of years. I think that they're the worst team in the Big Ten, but I don't even think they're completely terrible. They're not good, for sure. They're not, obviously not good, not average. But I just don't think that you can say, well, bottom team of the Big Ten, they're terrible. Bottom team of the SEC, they're terrible. I don't think that's necessarily the case with Rutgers. Should every team beat Rutgers? Sure. But Rutgers can beat a decent amount of these teams. If Minnesota went to Rutgers and Minnesota played a bad game, you could see Rutgers win the game. And that's Minnesota. That's a team we talked, 45 minutes ago about. So I don't think Rutgers is as inept as they have been the last couple of years. I'll say that. That's all I got on them.
Well, I know a couple of years ago I was on the bandwagon. I was on the Rutgers bandwagon, remember? I was cheering for them to get to 500 to make the NIT.
Yeah.
So that's when they were a lot younger. So the thing is, if you're a Rutgers program, you're beginning this season, this non-conference season, getting ready for Big Ten play. If I'm a fan of that program, my goal is to play in the postseason. And it's not going to be the NCAA tournament. It's going to be the NIT. What I want to see from CIT. Rutgers this year.
They could play in the CIT, Troy. That's the third tournament.
Oh, yeah, whatever. I want the NIT. So
okay.
I'm not going to say I'm on the Rutgers bandwagon because they are a bottom-level team in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
I want to see them do enough in the Big Ten, record-wise, to be able to play in the NIT. I think for Rutgers fans, that would be like making the tournament.
Yeah.
Because you have to remember, we've talked about teams in the Big Ten, whether it's football, basketball. Some teams, when you look at, you wonder, why are you even in the Big Ten? Because Rutgers in football, you're playing against the big boys, Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Wisconsin. Now you're talking about basketball, Michigan State, Michigan. Rutgers is nowhere near, not even sniffing the same table that those teams sit at. And could they catch lightning in a bottle one year and make an NCAA tournament? Ask Penn State how easy that is. And it's tough. So if I'm Rutgers and looking to see this program take the next step, it's not being a middle-of-the-pack team in the Big Ten. It's doing well in the non-conference, winning enough games in the Big Ten to get my record to 500 to play in the NIT. That's when I can then look at the program and say, you know what, we're not the laughingstock of the Big Ten anymore. And that's what I want to see Rutgers do.
Yeah.
I don't need to see them make the NCAA tournament this year, Kevin. I would love, and as we go through the year, remember what I'm saying today. I would love to see Rutgers be in the NIT. To me, that would be a huge, huge win for that program if they could play in the postseason. I'm cheering for them. It's just I look at a team like Rutgers, and I'm like, oh, you are so big. I'm talking just basketball. I'm talking everything. So maybe there's a little part of me that's like, come on, Rutgers, do something. Give me a feel-good story to talk about. But I think that feel-good story, as I say it one more time, and I'll turn it back over to you, is making the NIT. To see Rutgers playing in postseason basketball, Kevin, I would be just elated if that would happen for Rutgers. Now, I don't know if it will. It'll be tough because there's a lot of good middle-of-the-pack teams this year. But can they catch a few of them on a bad night? Sure. And I'm with you. I think they can win more than 3. I don't know how many more, but I think, like you said, they've got a couple really good players, and if they can catch lightning in a bottle a few nights, maybe they can win 5. Maybe they can win 6. I don't know. But I'm really, you had mentioned earlier, is there anybody I'm really rooting for? And I know where your question was with that. It was like, who are you rooting for the tournament? But as a conference overall, I'm rooting for Rutgers to make the NIT. So I know that I didn't answer it before because I know your question before was about who you're rooting for to pulling for to get in the NCAAs. And Rutgers not even close. But I'd love to see Rutgers in the postseason, Kevin. I would love it.
If they make the CIT, which, like I mentioned, is a step below the NIT, I think that's a success for Rutgers. I really do. I'd be happy if they made the CIT. Anyway, moving on. Last team here, and Illinois is better than Rutgers, but talking about Illinois here last. Illinois, I'm talking about them last because they're 3-7, and they should be 3-7. They should be 3-7. And Illinois is not terrible. I think they're bad, but they're not terrible. They're not atrocious. They're not worse than Rutgers, but they should be 3-7. They so far have beaten. Tell me where I'm wrong here, Troy. They have won every game they should have. They beat Evansville, they beat Mississippi Valley State, and they beat UNLV. UNLV this year, this is not one of those UNLV years where they make the tournament. It's not. So they should have won those 3 games. Here's the games they lost. Tell me where I'm wrong here, Troy, where they should have won one of these games. They lost to Georgetown. They lost to Gonzaga. They lost to Iowa State. They lost to Xavier. They lost at Notre Dame. They lost at Nebraska. And they lost to Ohio State. Which one of those games should they have won?
None.
Right. They should be 3-7.
So here's the thing. This is the one team where my cupcake analogies go right out the window.
This is unbelievable, the schedule.
I don't know who made that schedule. Because I had to look twice when I was looking at the records earlier today and knowing that we were going to do this show. And I'm like, what? Are they really that bad? Then I looked at the schedule, and I'm like, holy capoly.
Yeah.
Well, you're like playing the NCAA tournament back-to-back nights.
Right.
I mean, every single one of those teams you mentioned, we could be talking about in March.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you doing, athletic director? What are you doing to your poor kids? Because now they have no hope of making the NCAA tournament. Not like they were going to. But they have no hope now. They may not even have hope to make the NIT.
Right. They now know they don't belong. And that may not have been the case. That's part of the thing in the NFL, Troy. You see some upsets early in the year. That's partially because some teams don't know how bad they are yet. It's like, hey, can we go to Baltimore and win this week? Sure. No, you shouldn't. But you don't know any better when you're 1-1 or when you're 0-1. But if you're Illinois and you're 3-7 and you have no major victories, it's like, yep, we're a bad team. Look, we're 3-7. We can't compete with anyone who's decent. That's what they think about themselves right now. And you can't blame them because their schedule has been that ridiculous.
Kevin, that schedule is insane.
Yeah.
Like even a Duke schedule is not loaded like that.
I was just going to say, Duke has had more cupcakes. And Duke always has cupcakes, but I think Duke has had an easier schedule. Duke's played Gonzaga too. That's as good a team as you're going to play against, Gonzaga. Illinois has played them.
No, granted, this schedule was probably made, 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah,
but
the
teams that you've mentioned 3-4 years ago were in the tournament.
Even UNLV was better 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, they were.
That's one of the teams they won.
They were. So I'm going to take UNLV and put it into the loss where your losses were. That's 8 teams, Kevin, that you are talking about that are tournament teams. Why in your right mind would you schedule that prior to the Big Ten Conference? I can see 3 or 4, but 8? 8 of those games? You must just want to be like a glutton for punishment. Because even if you're a great team, even if you're Duke, even if you're Kansas, you have to go out and play top-notch opponents 8 times before you play in the Big Ten? Whew, if I'm the coach, I'm vetoing that. Unless the coach is the one that wanted that, I'd be like, screw you. I'm not playing this schedule. Change it. I mean, that is insane. Because, like I said, now, Kevin, they're 3-7. Even if they go 500 in the Big Ten, they're screwed.
Oh, yeah. They're not getting.
They can't even make the NIT.
No.
No. Maybe the thinking was, well, we're going to build some character. Well, that's not the right way to build character.
Yeah, it's too much.
Oh my gosh!
To have Gonzaga, Iowa State, Xavier, Georgetown on your non-conference, that's one thing. But then to add a Notre Dame at Notre Dame and UNLV at the time, it's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And then obviously Big Ten play is what it is, so they lost those games as well. But very tough. This schedule has been ridiculous. To end it, they've got 3 games before Big Ten play, and they play Missouri in one of those games, so that's another quality opponent they'll probably lose to. And then they've got 2 cupcakes.
That's no loaf of bread there either.
No.
Where's that game? Is it at home or is it at Missouri?
That's a neutral site game. They have played 4 neutral site games to this point, for whatever reason. Jesus, oh Lord. Whew. Yeah. Anyway, to talk about the team itself, Trent Frazier is, what is he, a sophomore? Yes, sophomore. Actually, before that. This is Brad Underwood's second year. He wants to be up-tempo. They're averaging 76 points per game offensively, and they're 3-7. They're also averaging 76 points per game defensively. That's the worst in the Big Ten, but then again, they've had the hardest schedule probably in the country. So it is what it is. They're scoring 76 points a game against those teams. I mean, that's something. We talked about it when Underwood was hired. He is a Big 12 guy, and he wants to run and gun. Football, basketball, doesn't matter. That conference wants to run and gun. He wants to run and gun. He wants guards. He wants athletes. That's what he's bringing in. Is it going to work in the Big Ten? It's his second year, so we don't know if it's going to eventually. But you were skeptical at the time. I'm a little skeptical. I think it's fun to watch. It's interesting. But anyway, team-wise, 7 deep, really. But they'll play 9 guys, especially when you're playing against really good teams and you're down by 20. Sophomore guard Trent Frazier getting in the team before we end this show finally. Trent Frazier, 14 points a game as a sophomore. So that's one of Underwood's guys, a freshman. is second in points. Another guard, Ayo Dosunmu, 12 points per game. So you've got young guys, you've got talented guys who Underwood is bringing in, and they're doing stuff. They've got a freshman forward also averaging, I think it's 8. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name. First name, Georgie. I'll say that much. Georgie B. But they've got a senior guard averaging 10 a game. This team is recruited to run and score, and that's what they can do. And they're really young. So we'll see what this team is in a couple of years, realistically. But that schedule, I mean, it's unbelievable. A very young team, and that schedule, good luck. They should be 3-7 at best, and that's what they are. So
they're lucky they're 3-7.
Yeah, these young guys know what good college basketball competition is. Very early in their freshman or sophomore years, they already know.
Here's the thing, Kevin. You talk about their style of play, and when you got that style of play and you're playing against teams of that quality, your style of play, I don't want to say it's neutralized, but those teams can play your same style. Those teams can score bucket for bucket with you.
Yeah, they're more talented right now.
Yeah, so. And they can go bucket for bucket with you. You want to run and gun and score 80, fine. Notre Dame is going to knock down 84.
Right.
You want to do that against Gonzaga, they'll knock down 100 against you.
Yeah.
So, here's the thing. Maybe once they get in the Big Ten, maybe they have been battle tested, and all of a sudden Illinois vaults to the top. Maybe that's what they wanted. I don't know, but I don't see it happening. I don't even see them getting to the middle of the pack. But this is a team, you talked about at the beginning of the show, offense is the way the game is going. So they get hot one game, and you get a Wisconsin team that can't score bucket for bucket with them. Illinois gets a win. I don't know how many Big Ten wins they're going to get, not enough to be relevant, but I think they're going to get a few. They're going to have an upset here and there. There's always an upset from one of the bottom dwellers. And Illinois is probably the most primed to have an upset because of the way that they play and the style that they have, because they're just going to chuck it up. So it wouldn't surprise me if we're talking about Illinois week to week, Kevin, and they pull off an upset a couple of times. Again, how many wins is it going to equate to? 4 or 5 maybe? But, they got to play Rutgers. I mean, it'll equate to a few. But all right, what else you got, my friend? We're at about 2 hours, which is about where I thought this show would end up, being a preview show.
Yeah. My last thought here, I think we can see Michigan State. Those are 2 legitimate title contenders, and I think 10 teams have a shot in the Big Ten to make the NCAA tournament. That's a lot. Obviously, not all 10 of them will.
Wouldn't that be something, though? Wouldn't that be something? And that's what I'm cheering for. I'm cheering for the conference this year, Kevin. Of course, I'm cheering for my Badgers. But along the way, I'm cheering for every team because I want the Big Ten represented in March Madness because there's a lot of good teams and there's a lot of teams that are exciting to watch. Will it equate to good basketball? I don't know. We got a long Big Ten season, but there's a lot of teams that are intriguing to me. And I'm just gunning for all of them.
Yeah. Northwestern, Penn State, Rutgers, Illinois. I don't think there's a shot there. But Purdue, it's 6-4. That's possibly a tournament team. Maryland 8-2, possibly a tournament team. Minnesota 8-2, possibly a tournament team. Nebraska 8-2, possibly a tournament team. And then you've got the 6 teams right now that are ranked. Obviously, possible tournament teams. That's 10.
That's exciting. We're back. We're back talking basketball every week now, Youngster, along with bowl games. Make sure you find us on Twitter at Youngster, known as our show handle. We put all our links to all our shows there. Go find us. Follow us there. You can follow me personally at TroyRobert967, and you can follow the Youngster at KidCunny, KIDCUNI. Hope you enjoyed this basketball preview, folks. Tune in, next week, Kevin? We got a little basketball, a little football. Got a lot of stuff going on at Go Big or Go Home. Thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate everyone that listens. Have a good day.